This is the #1 most absurd recommendation I have ever heard for exercise and well-being. I've stumbled across one of the most absurd videos I've ever seen on YouTube, thanks to a man named Will Harlow. Now, I take exercise very, very seriously, and it's my first profession. Exercise is medicine for people with injuries, chronic conditions, and a lot of chronic conditions come with age. Now, Will says that he is an over 50s physio specialist. I can't find anything to say that he actually has any sort of distinction. I also haven't found any papers that he's researched in the area. Most physios do specialize in over 50 because that's who happens to be going to see them outside of, say, athletic populations. But he has come out with a video that is, quote, "Don't do these exercises over 50. He says you need to be very, very careful with these exercises. He does say no exercise is bad, but then proceeds to say how exercise is bad.
5 of the worst exercises for people over 50. Now, before I go any further, there's no exercise really that's a bad exercise. Usually it's people's bad technique that causes them to be injured.
Now, I'm going to start with my contention here. People don't usually get hurt due to poor technique. People usually get hurt due to poor programming. The #1 reason that you're going to get hurt is if you increase or decrease your loads too dramatically over a short period of time and your body's not prepared for what you're going to be able to do. And yes, I said or decrease dramatically because there's a U-shaped curve of injury risk. Your body is attuned to continue to do exactly what it is doing. And this is the principle of training. You can slowly beat yourself into doing things you couldn't do before, and that's how you progress in a physiological sense. Now, let's get on to these 5 exercises. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on them, but if you're training at any age, and 50, this guy has just arbitrarily said 50 as marketing, which I don't see as bad in any way. That's totally justified. But 50 is not a magic age, but any age is not a magic age. We need to be covering off 6 movement patterns when we train: push, pull, overhead press, squat, hinge, and carry. If you can do those 6 things, you can live life well, and that should be your goal regardless. Now, funny enough, serendipity has made it the case that those are also the movement patterns for strongman. And so, yeah, I personally believe, with, of course, an immense amount of bias, that training strongman movement patterns should be the way that you're training for life. I did this before I started strongman, and the two just happen to coincide really, really well. As soon as you can't do one of those 6 movement patterns, well, you're not going to perform well if you're an athlete, or you're not going to perform life well if you're not an athlete. Personally, I see everyone as an athlete, and whether your sport is football or golf or baseball, whatever it may be, or your sport is life, you need to train yourself as an athlete. Now, his first one, the dangerous exercise, is upright row.
So the first exercise that I see people do over 50 that I think should be avoided is the upright row.
He said, quote, "This is a test to find out if you have impingement of the rotator cuff." Now, impingement diagnosis, if you get this in the shoulder, it's largely untrue. It's largely just a catch-all term. And if you're doing this exercise and you're not in pain, it's a negative test. Well, that's fine. There's another test called the empty can test where you're like this and they push down on your hand to see if your shoulder hurts. Well, should we also not do lateral raises? Just because something is a test, it doesn't mean that it should be thrown out as an exercise. It also shouldn't be said that it's dangerous as an exercise. He then says that it's probably stressing the rotator cuff, which is a good thing. He also says it's probably aggravating the rotator cuff. I don't know how you would know that, but stressing the rotator cuff is a good thing. Well, why? Well, rotator cuff is a group of muscles. There's 4 muscles, 3 by which contribute to external rotation, 1 by which contributes to internal rotation. And these muscles are very useful for holding the shoulder in place. Our shoulder is the most mobile and inherently then the least stable joint in our body. If you cut these 4 tendons, the only thing holding your shoulder in place is the ball and socket, or the labrum, and skin. If you cut the skin and pulled hard enough, you would pull the arm straight off the body. So do we want to stress the rotator cuff? Well, what's the adaptation to stressing a tissue? The adaptation is that tissue becomes stronger and more capable, which makes your rotator cuff more capable and your shoulder inherently stronger. Now, you don't want to do this to the point where it's going to cause you aggravation, but you certainly want to stress the rotator cuff and then rest and allow it to adapt and recover. He says, quote, "At 50 plus, your rotator cuff isn't as good as when you were 20. Well, for some people it is. I've met many people where they're stronger at 50 than they were at 20. This is all just due to lifestyle changes. And frankly, if you're not in good condition at 50. You feel energy is suffering, you feel weak, you feel tired. Well, maybe you should get a blood test done and you should get that sorted. 50 is not old. And if you need a blood test done, you can go ahead and go to Blokes, which I have in the link in the description, also in the pinned comment, and you can get your blood work done and check out, is this actually a problem for me? Now, surely you'd never have to do anything like an upright row in real life. So why do I care so much? Well, maybe you do have to do an upright row in real life. Oh. Oh. This video is brought to you by Lift Heavy Be Kind Apparel. It is my apparel brand, and I have something really exciting for you guys. For the first time, we finally have plus size in stock. This is 4X, 5X. If you are a man or a woman of larger stature and you would like to join the Lift Heavy Be Kind community, you finally have the opportunity to do so. Go ahead and check out the linked description and pinned comment, and go ahead, check out Lift Heavy Be Kind merch. We donate parts of our profits back into good causes. We just donated nearly $10,000 to my friend named Hudson, who has inoperable brain cancer. And hopefully, he's only 7 years old. Hopefully that goes out to help him a little bit. That's the type of stuff we do. Go ahead, welcome some other people into the gym. Without further ado, let's get back to the video. Exercise number 2 is back extensions.
The next exercise that people over 50 should almost certainly avoid is back extensions.
Now, first of all, he doesn't really know what a back extension is. And I think it's dangerous to just say back extensions are bad. He's talking about doing a back extension on a flat table and going into hyperextension, which also is not bad, but we'll dig into that in a second. He isn't arguing that the back extension machine at the gym is bad, the one where you lie there with it in the crook of your hips and you lean over. In fact, this is a much safer way for people who need to improve their back strength to reintroduce deadlifting. To introduce some sort of stimulus to the spinal erectors is naturally going to make you safer. No, he says, quote, "You're probably not using the muscles you want to use."
The other reason I don't like it is because people go crazy with it and they do loads of repetitions, and each time they're doing it, they're probably not using the muscles they wanted to use. They're using their paraspinal muscles, which can get tight quite easily.
And he says the Cobra, as in a passive extension, is great, but he do not reinforce this with strength. He said you can injure your disc doing these. This is just all absurdity. If you're doing a body weight movement and you're going into an active range of motion, i.e. you're not being pushed into extra range, you're just doing what you're capable of, it's not a problem. It's never going to be a problem. Will it be a problem if that's the only exercise you do? Probably. You'll probably feel stiff, but if you get yourself into an actual back extension machine and you go into flexion and up into extension, you're just training your back through a full range of motion. And I don't know what the argument is of people doing way too many. Our population problem, particularly with people over 50, but people in general, is that you're not moving enough. I don't think we have an exercise epidemic. We have an obesity epidemic. And frankly, if people did more exercise of any sort, we would be in a healthier position. I have no problem at all with back extensions. I think it's a actually safer alternative to reintroduce deadlifting. And there are many people who say deadlifting is a bad idea as well. Well, you have to be able to pick stuff up off the ground. Part of that's having a strong back, and a strong back can be built with back extensions. Now, just like with upright rows, I can say it's a good exercise, but do we have to do back extensions in real life? Oh. Oh. Exercise number 3 is the crunch. Now, we do have some common ground here.
Now, the next exercise that I don't really like for people over the age of 50 is the crunch.
I think this is a useless exercise, but people over 50 can do it no problem, just like people under 50 can do it no problem. But let's go into why Will believes people can't. He says, quote, "People go crazy at it." I don't know what is going on where this guy's living, but people are just crunching and doing back extensions like mad everywhere around him. That's not something I've ever experienced. I don't see people going crazy with any type of exercise en masse. So I don't think we really need to guard against too much movement. Then, quote, "Flexion can cause muscle spasm and hurt your discs." This is insanity. I don't know what on earth you're talking about, particularly when we're not even actually loaded. Just like sitting in a chair, I'm in spinal flexion. Should I also not sit in a chair? Uh, and so he said you can't do extension and you also can't do flexion. So no flexion, no extension when you're training. The purpose of training is having yourself in the most comfortable environment possible, the most controlled environment possible to expose yourself to loads that you're going to experience otherwise, whether that's for your everyday life or whether that's for your training for a sport. You should be doing everything that you're demanding of yourself outside. There's no rationale at all to say you should only operate in neutral positions until you're in real life and then just have a crack and see how awkward positions go. Now he says, quote, six pack isn't that important. Yeah, no, it's not the six pack muscles or the rectus abdominis. It is not that important. It's not contributing to your core stability all that much. There are way better core exercises. In fact, the number 1 and 2 core exercises are squatting and deadlifting. If you do intramuscular EMG studies, that's what comes out with the best core activation. And by the way, wearing a weightlifting belt increases that activation. It does not decrease that activation. Your lifting belt is not a crutch, and it's never been seen to be a crutch in a population study or in any sort of randomized control trial where they use intramuscular EMG. Now, he says, avoid the crunch if you're over 50. But if it's not a good exercise, I don't see why anyone should be doing it, whether you're 100 or 20. That being said, maybe a few crunches are okay if you plan on doing any one of these things.
Oh. Oh.
Exercise number 4 that you should not do over 50 is a behind the neck press.
The next exercise to avoid if you're over 50 is the behind the neck press.
It says, quote, you need lots of mobility in your shoulders to do this. Well, yeah, you do. Then he says, if you have arthritis in your shoulders, this will be hard, indicating that he has a misunderstanding of what arthritis is. But this is both individual circumstance. Of course, if you can't perform a movement, don't do the movement. Even if you're training for a world championship and you're 25, just don't do it if you can't do it. That's the most common sense advice I've ever heard. That it does not deserve a YouTube video to explain it. But do you need lots of mobility in your shoulders? Yes. Is it something that I can do? On a good day, yes. On a bad day, no. So on a good day, I might do it. And on a bad day, I definitely wouldn't do it. But if you can reinforce that range of motion that you can lose as you age, how good would that be? If all of your friends can't do something and you can, or you want to be able to improve overhead strength and you have another toolkit in your tool belt, or you're carrying something up over your head and you can stack it on top of your shoulders and have a really good range of mobility there. Well, these all sound like pretty damn good things that I would like to have when I'm a little bit older. Now let's talk about what arthritis actually is. Arthritis is decreased joint space. Now, decreased joint space is because you dry out, just like how you get wrinkles. That space decreases, and then you can have arthritic pain. But arthritis and arthritic pain, not the same thing. Anyone who's 60 will have their entire body riddled with arthritis, but they might only talk about their elbow is arthritic. Well, no, your whole body is arthritic, but you're only feeling arthritis in your elbow. So yeah, can arthritis play a role in decreasing mobility? Absolutely, particularly if you do have arthritic pain and an excessive inflammatory response. But if we're just talking about a decreased joint space, there are plenty of people 50 plus who can easily get a bar onto their back and onto their neck. He gives this example, like if the bar is pulling on the back of your head and that's how you perform the movement, like obviously, yes. If it's pulling on your head, it's pulling on your neck, it's not the movement for you. He also recommends not hitting yourself on the back of your neck if you're over 50. I'm going to extend this and say don't hit yourself on the back of the neck if you're of any age. This brings us to our last exercise, and this is neck rolls. This is the number 1 most absurd recommendation I have ever heard.
So the 5th and final exercise is called neck rolls. And this exercise is one that people do in a warm-up generally for an exercise class or similar.
Neck rolls is an exercise you shouldn't do, according to Will, if you're over 50. He goes like this. And by the way, if you don't know what a neck roll is, it's this. Like head circles, like when you're warming up for a sporting event. He says, quote, have a listen. There's cracking and crunching.
Have a feel and have a listen to what you can hear. So when I do this, I can hear clicking, cracking, crunching in my neck.
That's called crepitus. And crepitus anywhere in your body is not a problem. It's not indicative of anything at all. You're totally fine to hear cracking and crunching in your knees, your fingers, your elbows, whatever. It's not going to cause arthritis if you crack your fingers. It doesn't matter. It's fine. And by the way, that is well backed by the research. None of this is a personal opinion. He says, by combining movements of the neck, I'm putting my facet joints into funny positions, and goes on to say, you should, quote, keep to pure movements. He identifies pure movements as flexion extension, as lateral, and as rotation. I don't know if we're living on different planets, but I certainly cannot focus my neck movements only on one motion at a time. Or can I?
Oh.
Oh.
Now, obviously, I can't. And you can't, and no one can. We have to operate training from the basis of physical preparedness for whatever you might need to be prepared for. If you're an athlete, you're going to need to be prepared for your sport. If you're a general person, let's say someone over 50, but anyone out there who's training to become stronger, fitter, faster, you need to clearly communicate to your body through your movement and your behavior how you'd like your body to respond. If you focus on advice like this guy is putting out there, you're becoming fearful of movements, you're becoming extremely rigid. And if you are rigid to the point that this guy recommends in the gym, then you're going to be unprepared for the fluidity in everyday life. Now, I'm not saying that these exercises are great. I'm not saying that they are the first that I would put on a program, but they're all part of fundamental movement patterns. And remember, I said 6 of them. We got push, pull, overhead press, squat, hinge, carry. If we can cover off those 6 really well, we can get vulnerable parts of our body, like our rotator cuff, nice and strong. We can get our shoulder blades moving extremely well. You're likely to live a long, healthy life, or if you're an athlete, you're likely to live a injury-free life as an athlete. So I'd love to know what you guys think. This is the advice for over 50. I don't know why that's the age cutoff. I think it's bad advice. I think it's reductionist, and I think it would hurt people on the whole. In the end, it is more about what you can do with your progressions and with your exercise selections than it is about choosing a particular exercise itself. I fully believe, as someone who sells programs and makes my living off of helping people and what exercise should you be doing, I believe the least important thing when you're going to the gym is the actual exercise that you select, especially if you're not a competitive athlete. Why? Because how you progress those exercises is going to determine how much you improve. And how much you improve tracked over time is going to determine what sort of physiological adaptations are taking place. If we can't account for that and we're restricting our movement, you're going to be in a worse off spot. As I always say, lift heavy, be kind. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out the merch shop. Link in the comments and link in the description. Would love you to pick up some merch. And if you want to become the strongest version of yourself and you want to become robust in every movement pattern while following reasonable progressions and limiting any sort of injury risk, go ahead and check out my programs, moosecoaching.com. That's also in the linked comment. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We are posting videos every single day. If you want to stay on top of them, click that subscribe button, and we will catch you tomorrow.